year 2009 or 2010, I had the opportunity of flying on vacation from London to Dubai. It was my first time of going to Dubai. So I flew on the Airbus A380, massive airplane. I loved the experience, I enjoyed it. I landed in Dubai and I felt as if I was in paradise. It was so beautiful. So I asked the question, why is it that our leaders travel abroad, school abroad, live abroad, they return back home and they cannot replicate the experience abroad back home? The infrastructure, the beauty, the development, why is it that we don't have it back in Africa? So that question stayed on my mind for very many days. I was worried. Worried as far, this is Dubai with a similar history like Nigeria. Similar number of years of independence at the time. Then, more importantly, they have the same oil we have. I even think we have more than them. Then, they don't even have the number and population that Nigeria has, and yet they become a global phenomenon. So I'm asking myself, how did they come about this? What is responsible for this kind of economic and infrastructural development in Dubai? It was in the course of asking that question that I decided to walk into their library and ask questions about books written about the history of the United Arab Emirates and history of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I drove about 2 hours plus from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. It was the same experience. Same beautiful landscape, same beautiful infrastructural development. And when I was done reading about the history of Dubai, how they developed, how it was once a desert, that intrigued me the more. It got me to ask more questions. So I said, are there books written about the rulers of Dubai? And they said, oh yes. So they gave me some of those books. I read some. It wasn't too detailed. Then the guy who was attending to me said, the Sheikh of Dubai, who happens to be the Prime Minister, has just written a book titled My Vision. That have I seen it? I said, no. He said, oh, I'll bring a copy to you. Then he went ahead and he brought a copy to me. But it was written in Arabic. I couldn't read it. And they said, oh, I have to go to the National Library and get it. So I went ahead, got to the National Library, picked up the book, and read the back cover. It was an amazing book. It was titled My Vision. When I started reading the book, it opened my eyes to a lot of issues. And from reading that book, I started getting to answer some of the questions that I was asking. And because I was very curious and because by natural instinct I'm a researcher, I like to distill issues, I'm interested in governance, I'm interested in nation building. I have read a couple of other books about national development and nation building. So having read that book and having come in contact with the wisdom that that man demonstrated, I found out that the missing link between a nation that is developed and a nation that is not developed is the quality of leadership. And I realized that in my quest or in my occupation, I've had the opportunity of traveling around a number of African countries. I've had the privilege of traveling around a number of European countries. And I've also had the privilege of visiting a number of Asian countries. So I was watching the pattern. I could see the pattern across all the African countries. The same pattern, same history. History of coup, of war, of bad leadership. So I said to myself, is it that Africa is bereft of quality leadership, or is it that leadership is a myth in Africa? And that was why I asked that question, the leadership, and I said, why leadership principles, I was trying to answer the question, why leadership principles do not work in sub-Saharan Africa.
We want to briefly know why leadership principles do not work
it's a number of factors, yes. But I will narrow down on a few. 303-page book, several years of research, over 7 years of writing, and visiting different countries, especially the countries that I found quite interesting because of their history. For example, Burkina Faso. I'm a Thomas Sankara fan. Growing up, I wept the day I heard he died and he was killed. I wept. As a young person, I felt this is someone that espouses the kind of ideals we want to see in Africa. And this guy being killed just tells the story that we have to start all over again. So I realized that For example, in Nigeria, we got independence from the British government. We adopted the parliamentarian system of government in 1951 through the Macpherson Constitution. So our operational model of governance was after the parliamentary system. Then after a while, we dumped it when we've gone through a number of half-assed governance system. In 1963 or thereabouts, 66, during the first school, we abandoned the federal constitution and adopted the unitary constitution. Our constitutional models, our system of government also translated to presidential system of government. But if you find out, we were copying and pasting from different jurisdictions the model of governance that we felt would be suitable for us, or we felt was suitable in a particular place and it worked. We copied it without being mindful of the cultural context in which we were applying those governance systems or in which we were applying those leadership principles. Africa is peculiar, we are unique, and any principle that works in Europe will not necessarily work in Africa because of the peculiarity of our culture. When I say culture, people think culture is about dressing, it's about food. Culture is the prevailing mental model of a people that informs their behavior. Our cultural mental model was interjected during the colonial invasion. Our cultural model of leadership is more of rulership and lordship than is leadership. There, you have a communication model around leadership. Here, the way we define leadership around personalities. But leadership is about relationship between the leader and the followers. The leader communicates with the followers. Here, we have positional or political office holders that we assume are leaders or are rulers who do not communicate or do not see themselves as responsible to people they lead. These cultural factors also informs why some of our leaders behave as if they are doing the followers a favor. You know, they tell us things that, oh, look at them, I gave you road, I gave you pipe-borne water. They say it as if it was their money that they used. That means there was a sense of entitlement, of lordship, of lording it over us. Now, what we did not realize is that before the colonial invasion, for example, we had a system of governance with the Oyomesi Empire, where the Alaafin can be deposed by the Oyomesi, the Oyo Alaafin Empire. The Alaafin can be deposed by the Oyomesi. Why? If the king becomes tyrannical, the Oyomesi was the legislative arm, that they can vote him out. In Yoruba land, they say they will shiba fun, they will open the calabash. The calabash means you've been deposed. That means there was a model that was working for us. There was a model that was workable and suitable for our history and for our culture. But when we start imposing all these forms and systems of government that was not only alien to our culture, but does not apply and take cognizance of the context in which our culture operates, those models naturally fail. Because there's a spirit and there's an intent to those things, to those principles when they were formulated in those cultures. Those principles were formulated as a result of the peculiarity of their own culture. For example, another point is, in our part of the world, we have what we call a power distance. Power distance was part of the cultural theory model that Hofstede and his co-authors came up with, and which I reflected largely in the book. That in Africa, the leader is seen to be far from the people. He's high up there. The people feel helpless. They feel they cannot question the authority of the leader. And if you watch that model, the model plays out in our family structure, where a woman cannot question the husband. The husband is the alpha and omega of his family. He's the lion and tribe of Judah, of his home, where children cannot contribute. Children are to be seen, not to be heard. So all of those cultural models inform our style of governance. Now, we now have people who became political office holders, but they have never been to a leadership school in their life. They've never learned anything about leadership. In Nigeria, we lay claim to the fact that some of our leaders are not educated. It was just recently that we started having presidents with PhD. Even some of them, their PhDs are questionable. We are still debating whether the president has a certificate or not. Now, that's just formal education. But when we look at it in terms of training, you cannot have an engineer who did not go to an engineering school. You cannot have a lawyer who did not go to a law school. You cannot have a doctor who did not go to a medical school. How come we are producing political leaders who did not go to a school of governance or who did not attend a leadership school? Isn't that a problem? So they don't know the how of leadership. Even our semantics of leadership is wrong. I tell people there's a difference between leader and leadership. The leader is a person. He does not make up leadership. Leadership means a relationship between the led and the lead, where they come together in agreement to decide on a preferable future and the strategic objectives in accomplishing that future. And where the leader fails and breaches the contract, the followers have the right to boot them out. That is leadership. Leadership is a relationship between leaders and followers. And what cements or what concretizes that relationship is communication, is vision, is desired future. But when we look at our own structure in Nigeria and in this part of the world, you ask yourself, do we have a leadership? And if someone says, oh yes, we have leadership, I say, okay, does this leader communicate to us? Recently, we had the issue of the electoral bill. The body language of those who are in rulership over us, we were second guessing whether he was going to sign, he was not going to sign, he was going to sign. People were analyzing, TV stations were doing all sorts of analysis, then boom, he did not sign. He said, the body language was there to tell us why. They don't owe us any explanation. The attitude where people who are in rulership show that they don't owe the people an explanation is not leadership. And that is why those leadership principles do not work in our part of the world. I could speak on and on and on and about many instances, but I felt, let me just limit it at this. The most fundamental part is the semantics of leadership. That's the number one challenge. Our people have never experienced quality leadership before, let alone they define leadership. If you have never seen me before, if you don't know who Toye Sobande is, and somebody walks up to you to describe what I look like, you don't know whether I'm fair, you don't know whether I'm dark, you don't know whether I'm short, you don't know whether I'm big. So when you have not seen or experienced something before, it's hard for you to define. Nigerians have never experienced qualitative leadership before. So we have a problem of even defining it. Even the media also gets confused, because sometimes I see a lot of our journalists refer to ex-president and ex-head of state saying he ruled Nigeria from 1966 to 1970. He ruled, they use the word rule. And I wonder why do they use the word rule? Because that was our experience. That's a major issue, the semantics. Where the semantics is wrong, the description is wrong. Where the description is wrong, the identification becomes also a problem. And when you are unable to identify leadership, you cannot even now measure the quality of the leadership. I hope you get my line of thought. So that is one area of challenge. Another area of challenge is that we do not have a leadership development system. Culturally, we used to have a leadership development system before the colonial masters came, where we have the young age grade group, where they were taught farming, hunting, they were told tales by moonlight, stories that entrench societal values, value systems that build a society, that gives an identity to a people. In this current dispensation, how many leadership or governance schools or school of politics and governance do we have established that produces politicians that you and I can look up to in future and say, this is an emerging leader? We don't have. We don't have a system that produces credible, worthy people that we can field for elections and people can decide to vote. Another challenge is the fact that the followership themselves are highly irresponsible. We can't put all the blame on those who are in political governance in this nation. The followers are equally guilty. The quality of leadership that we emerge in any society is determined by the quality of the followership. Why? The leaders or the rulers emerge from the people. Even the Bible recognizes the fact that God gave them a king after their own heart. They were asking for a king. God said, I want to be king over you. He said, no, we want to have kings like other places. And God said, I will give you a king after your own heart. But this is what he will do to you. He said, he will use your sons as slaves to farm on his land. He will use your daughters as maids to cook their food, to tend to his gardens. So what we have now as a challenge is a followership that are lawless, that do not obey the law, that does not take responsibility for their own life. They do not obey civic and they do not obey simple rules and regulations in the society. They do not also follow the civic responsibility. For example, I drive on the streets of Lagos and I have situations whereby I'm looking at the bridge and I'm in traffic and we are wondering what is causing traffic. People are insisting on crossing the road. The government installed barricades to discourage people from crossing the road. They pulled it down. They would rather risk their life crossing the road rather than using the bridge. Who is going to suffer? Who is responsible for that? It's not the government. Somebody buys food in traffic, finish eating, and throws everything on the road. Who is going to go and clean it? So the followership have a contribution, and that's largely one of the problems of. Let me give you an instance of a distant person that I know who got into political office as a senior special assistant to a former vice president in this country. After securing that position, his family members started showing up at his house, making demands. His in-laws started showing up at his house, making demands. One of the demands they made was that their grandfather that died 47 years ago has been terrorizing their village. Why? Because he was not buried properly and is not sleeping well in his grave. And traditional rites require that they must rebury him so that there can be peace in the land. And they sent this gentleman a bill of 42 million naira for the cost of burying a man that died 47 years ago, simply because he's a senior special assistant to the vice president of Nigeria. That was not the only thing. The head of their family also sent him a message and mentioned the names of other family homes in their village that was befitting and said he's living in a shanty and it's not befitting to the name of their family. That everywhere he goes, people ask him whether he's related to the man that works with the vice president and he's living in a shanty, that the guy should come and rebuild his house and develop a proper befitting house for him as the head of the family to make the name of their family proud. As if that was not enough, his wife's cousins, 4 ladies, left their village and moved to Abuja and printed call cards saying they are friends of the office of the vice president of Nigeria and they can help you to do any business that you like, and they are distributing it across the streets in Abuja. How do you expect that person not to steal to please his people? If he does not do it, they'll give him a bad name. That you were in government, you did nothing for your people. And I've had so many people accuse different politicians and different office holders with that kind of allegation, saying they were in government, they did nothing to help people. So those are the basic challenges of leadership. Because when you get to government now, you'll be surprised at your family members' problems that will show up. And those who will expect you to use the power of office for personal gain. That way, we are further compounding our leadership problem in this country. And that's exactly one of the issues I highlighted and made mention of in the book. One area in which underdevelopment has come into sub-Saharan Africa as a result of colonialism is shocking when I say it to people. And I always like to trigger people's thought process with that point, is the fact that the colonialists did benefit us in some ways. They brought enlightenment to us. They brought education to us. But if you look at the educational model that they gave to us in sub-Saharan Africa, it was an educational model that was designed not to produce an excellent-oriented Nigerian. No. It was not an educational model that was designed to produce an exceptional Nigerian. No. They designed the educational curriculum to produce a Nigerian along a factory line process where they will be suitable to carry out clerical and administrative functions. Our educational system was designed for people to be able to read and write, carry out basic clerical and administrative functions. It was not designed towards research and development to solve environmental problems, health problems, technological problems. It was not designed around scientific development. It was designed around a factory line process where people go to school, they cram, they write exams without any practical application so that they can read and write and serve the colonial masters in their letter writing, in their telegrams, in all the other things they were doing. It is the few ones who left the shores of this country, went abroad to study professional exams, professional courses, became professionals, worked for a bit, then came back and they started improving the quality of things. And since they left, we have not taken responsibility by improving the quality of the curriculum of our educational system, such that we can produce Nigerians that are exceptional, such that we can produce Nigerians that are vibrant. For example, Globally, I have the privilege of schooling in the United Kingdom. I also have the privilege of doing my PhD in the United States. I have experienced the educational system in the US, in the UK, and in Nigeria. I can compare easily. Our schooling system in Nigeria is often rocked with ASU strike in the last 30 years. How can we continue to do the same thing over and over and over and over again without people looking at us as insane people? Why? The educational model that produced those professors who are not taking cognizance of the life of the young people that they are wasting and destroying their lives with the incessant ASU strike under the disguise of fighting for the welfare of their members and of the school. Shouldn't something tell you that the tactics you have adopted in the last 30 years is not working? It's insanity, for God's sake. Rather than fight for other basic things that could improve the quality of lives of people, you are only just concentrating and approaching it from the same strategic point. It's not working. Let me give you another example. Nations that have taken economic development very serious invest in what we call research and development in universities. They set up a research and development institute for malaria, for cancer. The Research and Development Institute carries out research of many years, then come out with a medication, come out with a drug, and they sell it all over the world. And that's why one of the greatest exports of the nations like America, Germany, is their pharmaceutical industry. And they are making billions of naira from it. And they sell it to us in Africa, and we buy. Why? Because we failed to think through and become ingenious with our own local products to develop solutions that are customized for the peculiarity of our problems. I heard a story of a white man who was working in Shagam over a cement factory, and he fell ill. And an old man was walking by and looking at the white man, looking at the reaction of the illness, looking at what he was doing. The old man told them to excuse him. And he was looking around the neighborhood. People were wondering what he wanted to do. He saw a plant, brought out the plant, peeled it, asked them to wash it, cooked it, prepared something like a concoction, and told them to give it to the guy that his body would calm down. They poured water on him. They said they should give it to him consistently, and the guy was perfectly fine. Instantly. What happened? That guy left, he was okay. He left, returned back to his base, and many years later, he came back, and they came to identify that particular plant, and they began to harvest it off our country. And they took it abroad, and they began to make medications out of it. What happened with the knowledge of that man, that old man? Why didn't, it's dead. We did not document it. We did not document the process. We did not document the knowledge. We did not customize it in such a way that it will be usable for us. But right now, the same product that is at our backyard, we are now importing it and spending millions and billions of dollars for something that we have native knowledge. I can go on and on and on again.
I saw some certain things that intrigued me.
Okay.
One of them was the misconception and truth about leadership in SS.
Yes.
The misconception.
Yes.
Can you just highlight few of the misconception and the basic truth?
There are a number of misconceptions. You know, Africa is full of contradictions. Everywhere you go, there are always contradictions here and there. You know, the conversation in Africa, for example, starts with the fact that whether Africa is a country or Africa is a continent. I've had an experience in Oxford, England, where a young 21-year-old lady asked me, are there really houses in Africa? And I asked her, are there I asked her a question, does your parents have they really confirmed that we are human beings or we are aliens? Because when you look at it, you're asking me, are there really houses in Africa? And I'm wondering, have your parents told you that we are aliens here on Earth and we are going back to another planet? And she was looking at me. I said, asking that question, I was wondering where it's coming from. There are a myriad of misconceptions. Number one, even we add to the misconception. The impression we give foreigners by our conduct. Let me give you an example. About a week ago, I was in Amsterdam and we were returning back to Nigeria from Amsterdam. While we were about to land, the pilot advised us that we should please, once the plane lands and the taxis for a while, we shouldn't